$200 says you've never opened your mailbox and found a demand letter that basically says, "Congrats on your farm. We now own half your profit." Because I have. And the funniest part? It came from an HOA I'd never joined, never lived near, and sure as hell never voted for. Like they just woke up one morning and decided my family's land was a new feature they'd like to add to their little suburban theme park. That morning I was out in the orchard, pruning peach trees with cold fingers and a hot coffee I kept setting down in the wrong place. You know that early day quiet where the air smells like wet dirt and wood smoke and the only sound is your own breathing and the snip of shears. I spotted the envelope sticking out of the rusted mailbox at the end of the gravel drive. It wasn't junk. You can tell. Thick paper, clean edges, embossed return address like somebody paid extra just to make the threat feel classy. Red Timber Creek Homeowners Association. I actually laughed at first, just a quick little no-way breath through my nose, because I live on 150 acres of private farmland that's been in my family since the early 80s, a good half-mile outside the nearest subdivision. My granddad laid these property lines like he was drawing borders on a war map. They've been in county records longer than most of the people living behind those HOA gates have been alive. There is no HOA out here. There never has been. My nearest neighbors are far enough away that if we both walked outside at the same time, we'd still have to wave like idiots to prove we're not hallucinating. But I've also lived long enough to know that when the world hands you something ridiculous, you don't ignore it. You read it, because sometimes the ridiculous turns out to be expensive. So I opened the envelope right there by the mailbox, coffee cooling in my hand, and that old familiar dread kicked in. The same gut drop I used to get back when I worked cases involving paper criminals who could ruin your life with a printer, a signature, and just enough confidence. The letter was cold and formal. 2 pages of bureaucratic perfume. Dear Mr. Randall McCormick, our records indicate that your agricultural operations may be in violation of Red Timber Creek HOA Article 12A Unauthorized Commercial Activity Extended Perimeter. And then the line that made me bark out a laugh loud enough to startle a crow off the fence. To remedy the situation, the board requires retroactive payment of 50% of net profits generated from agricultural activity for the last fiscal year plus immediate compliance with HOA landscaping and infrastructure regulations. 50%. Like they were my business partner. Like they'd been out here sweating in July, fixing irrigation lines, hauling feed, wrestling fences back into place after a storm. Like they'd ever done anything besides argue about mailbox colors and whether someone's trash can ruin the aesthetic. I folded the letter neat, set it on the porch railing beside my coffee, and just stared across the pasture for a full minute. The soil had been tilled 2 weeks earlier. Winter kale was just starting to haze the field green. Everything looked exactly the same as it had my whole adult life. No new roads. No new fences. No HOA flag planted in the dirt like they'd conquered it. So I did what I always do when someone tries to rewrite reality. I went straight to the records. I spent the next couple hours pulling survey maps, county registry documents, deed history, even old correspondence from when the first subdivision, Dry Hills Estate, got approved. The line between my land and Red Timber Creek had not moved an inch. Not in 40 years. I drafted a response, polite but firm. Attached photocopies of the most current county records, a GPS-marked survey I'd updated last year, a highlighted map showing their boundary stopping a solid 300 yards short of my southern hayfield. I overnighted it certified mail and figured that would be the end of it. I was wrong in the way you're wrong right before a storm hits. The next morning I was ankle-deep in the Chicken Run, replacing a busted water line, when I heard tires crunching up my drive. A gray Mercedes SUV rolled up like it owned the place and stopped beside my workshop. 3 people got out. Leading them was a woman in a blood-red blazer and khakis that looked like they'd never met honest dirt. Clipboard in one hand, digital camera in the other, walking with that smooth, confident stride of someone whose entire life has been a series of, "I'd like to speak to your manager." "Mr. McCormick," she said, even though my name was stenciled on the mailbox and burned into the wood arch over my gate. "That's me," I said, wiping my hands on a rag. She smiled, tight, controlled, the kind of smile that isn't friendly, it's a warning. "Karen Godfrey," she said, "president of Red Timber Creek." The 2 behind her looked younger and less sure, like interns who'd been told this would be good experience, and then realized they were walking into a situation that might end with someone screaming. "I received your response," Karen said, glancing at her clipboard like it was scripture. And I'm afraid you're misinformed. Misinformed. That word hit me like someone patting you on the head in public. She started explaining, with this calm, sing-song confidence, that the HOA board had voted last quarter to approve a perimeter expansion. My property now partially fell inside their extended maintenance and management boundary. She said it like she was telling me the weather. We posted the revision on our community board, she added. You should have received notice. I stared at her. Notice, I repeated deadpan, on a board I have no access to in a community I don't live in. Karen stepped forward and lifted her camera. Click. Click. She took photos of my irrigation lines like she was documenting a crime scene. This land now benefits from our services, she said. Therefore your commercial use is subject to community contribution, profit sharing, access rights, and aesthetic compliance. I blinked slowly. Are you trying to tell me you think you just annexed my farm? Her smile twitched. It's not annexation, she said. It's integration. You're now a participant in our planned development overlay district. That's when I laughed, loud, long, and completely without politeness. One of the younger guys flinched like laughter was violence. I leaned on the fence and said, calm as a man explaining basic math, you can take your integration and stuff it back in that SUV. My land is not part of your little utopia. It never was. And if you or your people step past my property line again without an invite, I'll have you removed for trespassing. Karen's eyes didn't blink. This isn't over, Mr. McCormick. Damn right it's not, I said. Next time, bring a lawyer. They left with tires spinning, just enough to let me know they wanted the last word. I watched the dust settle, then went inside, opened my computer, and created a new folder on my desktop. Karen Godfrey, HOA Threat Evidence Log 1. Something told me I'd be needing it. 3 days later I got a call from Joe Richards, retired surveyor, 73 years old, grumpy as hell, and one of the only men in this county I trust not to sell his soul for a seat at the city council brunch table. You got time to walk your southern line? He asked, skipping hello like always. Something ain't sitting right. By that afternoon, we were trudging along the edge of the southern pasture where my land butts up against an undeveloped slope of red clay and cedar. Joe carried a yellowed plat map like it was a Bible, tapping his GPS screen every few steps, grunting like the ground itself was insulting him. Then he stopped. There, he said, pointing. A freshly staked post sat just inside my fence line. Not mine. Plastic flag fluttering. The label read, RDC, E-Boundary. I crouched and examined it. Fresh paint. Fresh dirt around the base. Hammered in with something powerful, probably at night. Joe's jaw tightened. That's inside your deed boundary by at least 15 yards, he said. This ain't a measurement error. This is deliberate. And in that moment, the whole thing changed. Because a ridiculous letter is just noise. A smug HOA president is just annoying. But stakes in your ground? That's an attempted land grab. That's someone trying to make a life physical. That evening I drove into Stillwater and went straight to the county zoning office. I asked for any new filings in the last 60 days related to Red Timber Creek, expansions, overlays, revisions, anything. A young clerk named Ben pulled records up on his screen. Too honest for public service. That kid. You could see it in his face, like he still believed government paperwork meant something. And there it was, a revised HOA territory overlay map submitted 2 weeks earlier. Slick, glossy, stamped with preliminary administrative approval. It claimed Red Timber Creek had voted unanimously to integrate 5 new parcels. One of them was mine, labeled like it belonged to their future development plan. I felt the laugh crawl up my throat again, but this time it wasn't humor. It was disbelief. I asked to see the signatory file, and that's where things went from stupid to felony. The submission listed a corporate applicant, Red Timber Holdings LLC. Never heard of it, so I looked it up. It didn't exist. No registry, no license, no trace. Not even a bad attempt at a shell. But the signatures on the map, 2 county employees, they were off. Wrong pen pressure. Weird loops. For most people it might have passed. For me it screamed. I used to investigate forged filings and fake trusts, and people who thought tracing a signature made them clever. It doesn't. It makes them sloppy. I called in an old favor, pulled archived government forms with those same names and compared. Same names. Different hands. The signatures had been lifted from a 2019 document and traced like a teenager copying homework. Textbook. By the next morning, I'd assembled my first full evidence packet, photos of the false stakes, high-res scans of the forged submission, signature comparisons, deed overlays, and a summary report clean enough to make a judge's eyes water. I handed it to my attorney, Ellis Warren, ex-military mid-40s, built like someone who's never apologized for a damn thing. He flipped through the binder and let out a low whistle. "They're not just bluffing," he said. "This is organized. Someone's trying to legalize land theft." I nodded. "And failing to do it clean," I said. Ellis helped me file a formal complaint with the county prosecutor, plus a notice of fraudulent action against the HOA and any entity claiming authority over my land. We sent a cease and desist certified mail, return receipt. That evening I got a voicemail. No caller ID. Just Karen's voice, smooth like syrup over a razor. "You can ignore our notices all you want, Mr. McCormick, but the board has authority now. We're offering you a chance to settle this amicably. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Click. By morning, another envelope arrived. Same thick paper. Same fake courteous tone. This time, it included a neat spreadsheet calculating what I owed. Total: $1,634,128. Penalties: duas. Late fees. A bullet point breakdown of shared infrastructure usage. I read it while chewing bacon at my kitchen table, like it was a menu, and I was deciding what to order. Then I slid it across to Ellis. He stared at the number, muttered something about racketeering statutes, and poured himself another cup of my coffee like the coffee was the only thing keeping him from committing a felony. That night I didn't sleep much, not because I was scared, but because now I was angry in that quiet, focused way that turns your brain into a machine. You ever get served a lawsuit before sunrise? I have now. 5:30 a.m., frost still on the fields, a white Toyota with no plates crept up my drive like a thief. I watched from the window with my third cup of black coffee. The driver didn't even stop, just tossed an envelope out the window and peeled away. Notice of civil action. Red Timber Creek HOA had filed suit in district court, and they weren't asking for money like this was a misunderstanding. They were swinging for the fences. 50% of all farm revenue over the last 2 years. Mandatory retroactive HOA membership. Annual dues starting at 16 grand. Immediate compliance with architectural standards. And my personal favorite, shared resource access, including full control of my private groundwater well, which they claimed was vital for neighborhood water pressure stabilization. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled coffee. Ellis read it and said, "They're filing forward. They know the map's forged. They're using the lawsuit to muddy the waters." "It's a smoke bomb," I said. We had a choice, delay the hearing or face it head on. I didn't want to wait, because if a court even entertained their fiction, every landowner in this state would be fair game for whatever desperate little kingdom wanted to expand. So I decided to walk into that courtroom and crush the fantasy under my boot. Court day came fast, one of those beige Oklahoma mornings where the clouds sit low like a lid on a boiling pot. I wore my best jeans, least dusty boots, a dark gray shirt. No tie. I walked into the courthouse like I used to walk into depositions, calm, stone-faced, loaded with evidence. Karen was already there, front row, smug, flanked by 2 lawyers. Her attorney, Wilson Mace, had the look of a man who'd eaten junior associates for breakfast and still wanted dessert. They opened strong, theatrically. They called my farm unregulated commercial encroachment. Used phrases like regional fairness zone, like they weren't made up during a wine-fueled HOA meeting. Then it was my turn. I asked the judge if I could address the court directly. He nodded. I pulled out a bound report, 120 pages, tabbed and annotated, and handed copies to the clerk and opposing counsel. Inside were side-by-side overlays of official property maps, certified deeds, survey logs, photos of the forged stakes, and a page-by-page analysis of the fraudulent filings. Then I flipped to the part one knew would change the room temperature. "Your Honor," I said steady, "this is a notarized affidavit from the county zoning office stating these maps were never approved through official channels and no public hearings were held. The signatures on their application were lifted from a 2019 government form and digitally altered." I paused. "Let it hang." "And this," I said, holding up a flash drive, "is security footage of Ms. Godfrey trespassing on my land with 2 accomplices, staking flags, photographing irrigation systems, and threatening to seize control of my groundwater well." Karen didn't flinch at first, but her lawyer leaned in and whispered something, and I caught it, just a tiny twitch in her left eye. Panic. Here's the twist nobody expected, not even me. The judge didn't dismiss the case right there. He didn't rule in anyone's favor. He lowered his glasses, looked over my binder, and said, "Bailiff, I want a representative from the district attorney's office in this courtroom." The room went dead quiet, the kind of quiet where you can hear your own heartbeat and somebody's cheap suit fabric shifting. "Given the material submitted today," he said, flipping pages, "this may exceed the scope of civil proceedings. I am referring this matter for review under forgery, conspiracy to defraud, and criminal trespass." Karen finally spoke, voice sharp. "This is a civil matter. We were asserting community interests." The judge stared at her like she'd just farted in church. "You submitted documents under a fake company name," he said flatly. "This court is adjourned." The gavel came down, and just like that, Karen's confident little performance collapsed into something uglier. Frustration, fear, calculation. Outside the courthouse, a handful of local landowners and one small-town reporter hovered like they could smell blood in the water. I didn't speak. I walked to my truck, started the engine, and sat there gripping the wheel, not celebrating. Because I'd seen that look before, the look of someone who realizes they're cornered and decides the rules don't apply anymore. I was barely out of the parking lot when my phone buzzed. "Miguel, my foreman." 3 words. They hit us. I drove back like I was late to my own funeral. Gravel sprayed when I turned into the property. Miguel met me by the barn, face tight, arms crossed, and just nodded toward the lower field. The irrigation lines, the backbone of our winter yield, had been slashed, not punctured, not accidentally damaged, but gutted in long, deliberate cuts. Clean slices for 50 yards. Water pooled dark under the frost, bleeding into the soil like the land had been stabbed. Miguel said quietly, "Happened last night." We checked after sundown. It was intact. Then we saw the second message. Survey stakes again, red and white, dotted the field in a perfect grid, each marked RDC Sector C, reserved for community greenway development. It looked like a deranged HOA art installation. Miguel kicked one over. "They actually think they own this." I photographed every single stake. By afternoon, 2 workers told me they'd been stopped on the road by men in Navy windbreakers with clipboards asking routine compliance questions. One flashed a laminated badge with no seal and no name. Another took pictures of their truck and followed them for 3 miles before disappearing. Ellis came out that evening. We walked the property together, and he recorded everything with the calm, patient expression of a man building a guillotine out of paperwork. "This isn't bluffing," he said finally. "They're escalating to coercion and sabotage. They're trying to break you." So we adapted. More cameras. Infrared units on every outbuilding. Perimeter alerts to my phone. And here's where the unexpected character walks in. The kind you don't plan for, but you thank God exists. Paige. Local vet. Former military police. The type of woman who looks like she could chew nails and still have room for dessert. She agreed to do nightly patrols in an unmarked pickup. No decals. No drama. Just competence. A shotgun in the rack and a big shepherd in the back seat that watched everything like it had opinions. 4 nights later, at 2:30 a.m., I got a motion alert, barn entrance. I watched the live feed, a tall figure in a hoodie and gloves slipping through the side door like he belonged there. Another camera caught him clear. He carried a black briefcase with HOA branding and set it on my office desk. Then he left. I didn't call 911. I drove down there in the dark, lights off, and by the time I got inside, the guy was gone. But the briefcase was real. Inside were pre-filled notice of assessment forms, backdated penalty amounts, forged late fees, photocopies of demand letters addressed to me, all neatly arranged like evidence somebody wanted found during an official inspection. It was bait, a planted file. But the idiot made one mistake. He left fingerprints. Sheriff's office dusted the case, ran the prints. 2 days later I got the call. Gregory Ronson, convicted in Kansas for document forgery and extortion, released 3 years ago. And guess who had posted his bail last time? Karen Godfrey. Ellis raised an eyebrow for the first time in weeks. So now we've got conspiracy, attempted fraud, trespass, and obstruction if they were prepping planted evidence. And that's federal, I said. Ellis nodded slowly, like he'd been waiting to say the next part. They'll take it, especially if we show who's paying for the playbook. I never thought I'd feel relief seeing a black Suburban in my driveway, but when 2 federal agents stepped out, one in a charcoal suit, one in jeans with a DOJ badge clipped to his belt, I felt the tide shift. They sat at my kitchen table, polite and measured, no small talk. Miguel brewed coffee like we were hosting a stakeout. I handed them hard drives, footage, logs, filings, maps, signatures, the whole ugly story. The woman, the prosecutor, looked through it all and then slid a tablet across the table. On it was a list of names, HOA board members, flagged transfers, wire paths, payments routed through shell entities, Red Timber Holdings and Creekside Management Group. Both unlicensed. Both receiving maintenance payments that ended up in personal accounts. And Karen? I asked. She swiped again. Highlighted transfers lit up the screen like a Christmas tree. She's signing most of the checks, the prosecutor said. And based on the wire paths, she's getting a cut from every expansion zone contribution. So that was the real story. Not just ego. Not just power. A money machine. My farm wasn't a misunderstanding. It was the crown jewel. If she could force a 150-acre operation into voluntary compliance, every small landowner in the county would look like an easy meal. And then the final escalation, because of course there was one. The night the news first broke about a federal investigation, Paige found a dead jackrabbit nailed to my front gate with a paper sign stapled to it. Farmers don't win. She called me angry and shaking. The sheriff took one look and radioed for backup. This isn't HOA drama, he said quietly. This is intimidation. And here's the thing about intimidation. It only works when the target is isolated. But Karen's little empire had gotten loud, and loud attracts attention. Warrants followed. Raids. Servers seized. Her ridiculous house with fake marble lions out front got wrapped in crime scene tape like a bad reality show. And in a detail so disgusting it almost made me respect the audacity. The feds discovered she'd filed unanimous approval paperwork under the names of deceased residents to make the expansion look legitimate. Dead people voted her scheme through. That's not overreach. That's rot. A week later, Karen Godfrey got walked out of her house in handcuffs, silk robe, hair a mess, still barking like agents were inconveniencing her brunch schedule. Someone filmed it and tossed it online. It hit millions of views before lunchtime. But I still didn't celebrate. Not until the indictments dropped. 9 people. Federal charges. Conspiracy. Wire fraud. Forgery. Money laundering. And Karen? 13 federal counts, including racketeering. The kind of charge you associate with mob bosses, not PDA tyrants with clipboards. Turns out you can run a crime ring with spreadsheets and community guidelines if you're shameless enough. I testified. Again. This time without anger, just clarity. When you've lived through enough lies, you learn the truth doesn't need theatrics. It just needs to be clean. The verdict came fast. Guilty on all counts. Karen got 12 years federal, no parole before 9. Her co-conspirators got between 4 and 9, depending on how quickly they decided loyalty wasn't worth prison food. And the HOA? Dissolved by judicial order. Assets frozen. Fake companies liquidated. Fraudulent filings expunged and replaced with real maps, real lines, real truth. I got a settlement approved by the court. Damages for lost revenue, legal fees, sabotage, reputational trashing. When Ellis handed me the number, I just stared at it for a long time, because money doesn't unslice irrigation lines, and it doesn't erase the feeling of waking up and realizing someone's trying to steal your life with paperwork. But it did mean one thing, bright and undeniable. They lost. Every scheme, every fake map, every midnight intrusion snapped in half under consequences. I mounted a new sign at the entrance myself, 1/4-inch steel plate, powder-coated black, lettering cut deep enough to read from the road. No trespassing. This is not an HOA. Private land. Step past the line, face charges. Some folks might call that overkill. But after you've watched a smiling woman in a red blazer try to integrate your livelihood into her scam, you earn the right to be crystal clear. A few weeks after the dust settled, I started getting letters. Handwritten. Shaky cursive. Neat print. People 3 lots over from Red Timber Creek. People who almost signed integration paperwork because they thought it was mandatory. A widow who found her late husband's signature on a vote he never cast. Folks thanking me for standing up when they were too scared or too tired. And that's where the lesson hit me. Not like a sermon, more like a bruise you finally notice once the adrenaline wears off. Most of the time, power doesn't win because it's right. It wins because it's exhausting. It wins because regular people are busy, isolated, worn down, and the system counts on you choosing peace over resistance, even if that peace is just paying a little money to make the bully go away. Karen wasn't special. She was just the kind of person who realized the world is full of folks who'd rather avoid conflict than risk a fight, and she tried to build an empire on that instinct. She forgot one thing, though. Some of us grew up on land where you don't get to avoid problems, you face them, or they eat your crops. Now every morning, I walk the property like I always have. The wind still rolls over the hills. The orchard still smells like life. The new irrigation system purrs like it's proud of itself. Miguel's got the work truck he never asked for. Paige still drives the perimeter sometimes, mostly because she likes reminding the world she exists. And Karen Godfrey? She's in a place where clipboards don't matter and nobody cares about her community standards. That part, I'll admit, feels pretty damn satisfying. So here's the question I can't stop thinking about, and it's the one I want to throw at you. When someone abuses rules and authority, to steal what isn't theirs, how far is too far when you push back? Is it always better to stay civil, or is there a point where karma needs a little help? Drop your take in the comments. Tell me where you draw the line between justice and revenge, and if you've ever dealt with an HOA, a corrupt official, or anyone who tried to bully you with paperwork, I want to hear your story too.